Welcome to the Region of Solution podcast, where we give you insider's take on the impactful work and initiative at ESCAP. I'm Sompot Supputhamongkhon.
And I'm Veronika, Verner. Welcome to another episode of our series. Today we are here to explore a concept that is closely linked to ESCAP's effort in fostering economic and social progress, sustainable foreign direct investment, FDI. And to give us insight into how this concept is applied in action, we have in-house experts from our Trade, Investment and Innovation Division.
There is often a tendency of viewing FDI from a one-dimensional lens, looking at just the economic impact of the phenomenon. Here at the United Nations, innovation is being applied to integrate sustainability into the application of FDI. This allows for an exploration of how FDI can also be a tool for bringing about impactful change in promoting equity, climate change, gender equality, and leveraging innovation for sustainable development. To take this conversation forward, today we have with us Heather Taylor-Strauss, Economic Affairs Officer, and Mr. Jonathan Wong, Chief of Innovation, Enterprise, and Investment from Trade, Investment, and Innovation Division, based here at ESCAP headquarters in Bangkok. Welcome, Heather and Jonathan.
Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to ESCAP? Let's start with Heather.
So I've been at ESCAP now just about 9 years. I've had the fortune of working now in multiple divisions. I've been in our Trade, Investment, and Innovation Division now going on about 6 years. For a long time, I was employed in academia. I was working as a professor and a lecturer, also working on foreign direct investment. And while I very much enjoyed that work, I was really looking for something that was more impactful and directly working with countries on how they can increase FDI into sustainable development into their countries. So that led me to ESCAP and working in the Asia Pacific region.
Close to this topic, I actually used to be an investor, and I had the pleasure of investing both government money and private money as well. I worked for a venture capital fund and was a partner in a venture capital fund where my bonus was linked to how much money I made, essentially. So it was investment purely for the economic aspect, as you mentioned. But since then, and to kind of broaden this out, I'm a true believer in investment should benefit people and planet as well as profit. And I've also had the pleasure of working in the UK government, where I established some technology and investment funds investing in healthcare technology. I was then the head of innovation at the UK Department for International Development, where I established a global innovation fund, investing in companies that were looking to generate social and environmental impact alongside economic impact as well. And this led me to somehow ending up in the UN. So that's kind of a brief snapshot.
Yeah, now both here at ESCAP, one of the common questions we ask our colleagues on every episode is what solutions you're working for the region?
As the UN, our main stakeholders are governments, right? And while many of our colleagues are working with specific line agencies, line ministries, our specific counterpart for our investment work, for our foreign direct investment work, are the investment promotion agencies in our member states. So those are the agencies that hold the mandate to go out and attract investors and bring them into their countries into specific investment projects and opportunities. So we work with those investment agencies to do a number of different things. The biggest thing that we're doing with them is really to help them focus their work and develop practical action plans and strategies to target investment in niche areas related to sustainable development, so that they have a more realistic and high potential chance of getting investment into that sector, because they narrow down the pool of investors, and the potential then is increased, but also more likely over the next 2 to 5 year time frame. So we've worked with 22 countries to develop and implement these practical investment action plans and strategies. So for example, in Bhutan, we worked to develop an attraction plan for the digital economy and invest in the digital economy. And when you hear that, you go, gosh, what does that mean, right? And that's exactly how we reacted at first. What does that mean? Let's narrow it down. And we figured out the 5 most likely sectors where they could attract investment within the digital economy, developed a plan with them, and then implemented it. One of the most exciting ones I found in that plan was attracting investment into drone testing for high altitude areas to support medical equipment going to marginalized communities within their mountain ranges. We are developing a program with about 8 Pacific islands right now to develop hub and spoke investment projects and key sustainable development sectors. So as you can see, we're very active across ESCAP member states and across our regions. We regularly offer capacity building trainings to IPs from across the region, bringing them into Bangkok, also doing it virtually and also in country. In the last 3 years, we've offered about 66 capacity building trainings to a variety of countries. And one of the things that I personally am very proud about of these trainings is not just, enabling these investment promotion agencies and their technical staff to do more effective jobs in promoting and attracting investment, but also bringing them in touch with real investors. And I think that's often lacking in a lot of these policy dialogues about investment or financing. What are the real investors? What are the corporates saying? The ones that are going in and investing in a country? What are their priorities, their struggles? How can countries do a better job of attracting their investment? And also, how can they get them to invest in areas that are important for sustainable development?
Our big idea really is around how we can mobilize FDI for the SDGs. The reason why we think it's a big idea and a big solution is twofold. Firstly, FDI is the largest financial flow into developing countries, far surpassing overseas development assistance. So you hear a lot of talk around the role of multilateral development banks and how they can impact people and planet as well. But that's actually a very small amount of money. FDI is even, I think, double, maybe 2.5 times the size of private equity and private debt. Our work on FDI is actually innovating FDI. Traditionally, FDI has been used for economic objectives. Countries want to kind of increase GDP. For me, pivoting FDI, not look at just the economy, but environment, society, is a big idea and is an innovation.
Wonderful. Many consider sustainable to be a buzzword that is used fast and loose in the development sector. So before all else, can you start by giving us the overview of what sustainable foreign direct investment is and why it goes beyond just economic benefits?
So I'm going to be a little bit controversial here. Right now, where we stand in the FDI practitioner world, the academic world, international organization world, we tend to stay away from using the terminology sustainable FDI. And there is no agreed on terminology definition for what sustainable FDI is. There's good reason for that. At the end of the day, foreign direct investment is a corporate investment or an institutional investment coming from one country into another country. Their main goal is return on investment and profit. So putting a sustainable in front of it makes it very difficult to define. What is a little bit easier to swallow, especially for investors, to get them to buy into these things, is when we say to them, yes, we understand return on investment is important. Profitability is important of your investments, but you can still align your investments, your investment projects with sustainable development principles. You can still do these investments in sustainable development sectors. So instead of saying sustainable FDI, we tend to try and focus it a little bit more around FDI for sustainable development or FDI with an impact on sustainable development. And this really translates down into a practical level. When we look at what governments want from FDI, beyond just their impact on GDP, the two main goals, the two main KPIs for every government when it comes to FDI is how much capital are they bringing into the country, so they're increasing their foreign exchange reserves, and also how many jobs is it going to bring. There we already have one additional thing other than just economic benefits, jobs. We can further disaggregate this into how many jobs is it going to provide at the senior management level, at the factory floor level, to women, to youth, how much training is going to be provided to them. So we really get into more of the labor market outcomes there. Now, FDI in itself, though, it can contribute to other things than just bringing capital in and creating jobs. When an investor goes into a country, they can build supply chain links with the local entrepreneurs in that economy. We've worked with a company, for instance, in Fiji called Misugo. It's a goat milk soap brand that was created by a women entrepreneur. Through the investment promotion agency, we were able to support her in getting her brand and her soaps into all of the major hotel chains across Fiji. This is really important because it's a good example of hotel chains being the foreign investor backing up into the local economy and supporting a local women entrepreneur there. So in addition to supply chain links, we can also see FDI contributing to things like skill development, technology transfer. Other areas include, when we think about investing in renewable energy sectors, investing in healthcare, investing in building hospitals.
Heather raises a good point. Now, when I speak to the business community and investors, I actually say, don't think of it as a development challenge. It's a business opportunity. There's very good evidence to suggest that investments in women-led enterprises and women-led businesses have multiplier effect on the economy, but society and communities as well. And I think there's something on how we frame the language on this one. I say investing in a woman-led enterprise just makes sound business sense. Things like investments in new wind parks and solar energy. I mean, these are new frontier industries and new markets. And again, I think framing them in a way of not seeing it as this is sustainable FDI, but actually this is just a sound market opportunity and a business opportunity, which has sustainable development impact.
You shared some of examples on sustainable FDI in action. So can these models be replicated elsewhere in the region?
So I think we have to kind of step back. There's two things that we could be talking about here. First is, what can countries do to attract investment that is going to contribute to their sustainable development priorities? So at a country level, that focuses on investment attraction efforts and investment promotion efforts. The other side of the coin, which is, what about the corporates, the companies that are investing? And how can we get more companies to do those kind of investments, get the companies that are already doing it to invest more, and encourage companies that aren't doing it to do more investments like that? So if we're looking at the country level thing on investment attraction, how do we get corporates to come to our country, invest in the sectors we want them to, and make an impact on what our development priorities are? So that starts off basically at the national level, typically in the development ministries that prioritize what sectors are most important for them. If a country's sector priorities are health, tourism, digitalization, agriculture, which are actually most of the countries we work in, most of their priorities. So they'll look at those broad sectors, and then what an IPA's job is and what ESCAP is supporting them in doing is to figure out within those broad areas, where do we have a competitive strength that's really going to bring an investor in, and how can we find those investors and target them? We worked with Sri Lanka recently, and Sri Lanka said, okay, we have priorities to bring investment into digitalization, the digital economy, and also into health. So let's focus on the health aspect in this conversation we're having. So when we said, okay, what does health specifically mean to you? Where do you want your investment? And he said, well, we really want to get investment into the pharmaceuticals industry. So we said to the IPA, okay, great, let's do an exploration of how are you going to find the investors to come into your pharmaceutical industry? When we look at the pharmaceutical sector, there are hundreds of thousands of companies. So we worked with Sri Lanka to first narrow down that pool to say, okay, where are your competitive strengths? What came out is that they had competitive strengths in contract research and manufacturing, and also in clinical trial testing. So all of this is very important also for vaccine development, new drug development, and generic drug development. And all of this could contribute to improving the healthcare systems within Sri Lanka, contributing to the overall country's sustainable development priorities, right? So once we figured out what the sectors are, we matched those sectors with the investor requirements, and then came up with a plan of how they could attract those investors, and then work with them to identify the most potential investors to come in. Developing those practical action plans, figuring out your competitive strengths, and then following a process for investment attraction and promotion, that's really key at the country level. When we go to the corporation level, a part of it is first understanding the corporates that are investing in these sectors. Recently, about 6 months ago, we had a company based in Thailand with investments across ASEAN in one of our workshops. And this company is in the chemical industry. The company said point blank to the 10 agencies sitting in the room, although our operations are in the chemical industry, we have committed to being net zero by 2040. Your countries cannot guarantee us reliable and stable connections to the grid for renewable energy. We don't have the capacity to install our own renewable sources of power in our factory. If you don't get this sorted out, we will pull out of your country. And we've already started the market analysis for other countries. What this ended up doing was sparking kind of chain reaction, where those IPAs that it was specific to went and talked to their ministries of energy and utilities to go and work with these companies to figure out ways to get them more reliable and stable power sources. This is just one example, but what I'm trying to pull out of that is really understanding what is driving corporate investments. As Jonathan said, the business opportunity, understanding what they need and how to package it to them, and working with them to really encourage them and getting them over the line in countries to invest in these sectors is most important.
An important point to note for us is that, and the approach we take is we're very, very realistic when we work with countries. We look at investment attraction plans that would yield results in maybe 1 to 2 years. Otherwise, you can work on a beautiful policy and a set of regulations that may not see the light of day or may not even come to fruition for maybe 5 to 10 years.
So we went to this country and they had just wrapped up a project with a counterpart international organization that also works on FDI. They showed us the report that they got from this other organization, which does do really great work. But the report itself was a 300-page document and largely outlined all of the challenges in that investment environment, all of the policy things that need to change, but a very big ticket budget on how that change needed to happen. And this country was an LDC too. And what ended up happening is that document didn't result in anything. It sat on the desk of that agency and is still sitting now in the bookshelf, and they've done nothing with it. because they just cannot realistically implement it and they don't know where to start. And I think that's a part of really where we're coming from as a team, that we want to make sure that the things that we're doing with these agencies is practical and realistic and achievable for them.
So when it comes to development finance, how big a role has been played by the sustainable FDI?
Jonathan and I love this question. So what most people do not is that actually FDI has been the largest source of development capital globally for the last, I think it's been now 3 decades. It's larger than MDBs, larger than ODA, larger than private equity debt, all of it. Just Asia Pacific. In the last 6 years, FDI corporate investments into sectors related to climate action, so not just wind farms and solar parks, but more broadly climate action, was double that. And this is just one type of FDI. So we have about 398 million that came in through FDI and roughly 183 billion that came from ODA and MDB financing.
It's kind of the forgotten child of financing and investment. This is like the big solution that's really relatively untapped on these types of global platforms. That's why it's kind of a real priority of our work.
So why is it so crucial for investment to be equitable and sustainable? And how does this drive the focus of your work?
So a big part of our work over the past 2 years since we've started focusing on this is first just figuring out, how does FDI even impact gender? And what are the gender equality outcomes that it can have? And really taking the firm level perspective on it, seeing what firms are doing to impact gender, and then seeing what the investment agencies that not only bring the investors in, but then also work with them after they've invested can do to encourage investors to do something and do more. When we think about it that way, we see there's 2 broad areas where FDI can play a role on gender. And one is inside the firm, both in the employment figures at the senior management level, at the factory level, outside of the firm through linking up with women entrepreneurs in the local community, as well as through communities. The specific areas where FDI can play a role, obviously employment figures, offering things like maternity leave. That's the most obvious things, contributing to the gender pay gap. We all know that, and that's what we all talk about. I think the less obvious ways that FDI is making a real difference to gender equality in the countries that corporates are operating in is through things like creating gender councils in the corporations, providing sanitary provisions to women. We've worked with a company that's doing this in Cambodia and in India. Another is through providing safe door-to-door transportation. This is a really big topic in South Asia in particular, but also in many Pacific islands. Providing daycare centers, providing courses to build the skills of women and girls in the local communities, and also changing procurement policies so that you can link up to more women entrepreneurs in the local community. So I think those are some good examples of the broader thing. I'll use this to also promote the pledge that we recently launched among investment promotion agencies that are committing themselves to do more for gender equity with the investors that they're working with.
Thank you for your fascinating insight into how sustainable FDI goes beyond the financial aspect. Before we wrap up, what would you like our listeners to take away from today's conversation?
Okay, number 1, FDI is important for sustainable development. Number 2, how can we better leverage it for sustainable development? Number 3, investment promotion agencies are an important conduit to channeling investors, their investments into investment in sustainable development.
I'm going to make a point that's probably relevant to all of the listeners, regardless of where they are in the world or what sector they work. A lot of foreign direct investment is made by corporates and corporations. And each of us, every single day, we buy products and we buy services every day, several times a day, right? Whether it's in the supermarket or wherever it may be. Have a think about what you buy and who you buy from. Have a think about whether the company has a strong social objective, is good for the environment. Because I will say this, we work with governments and obviously work for the UN. Corporates may not always listen to governments or may not always listen to the UN. They will listen to their customers because it just makes good business sense. So always just have a think about that whenever you can. The next time you pick up a certain product on the shelf, think about where it comes from and whether it's doing good. If we always do that, I think the world will be a much better place.
Thank you. This reminds me that we can all make a difference, Jonathan, everyone in the region.
I learned a lot today personally, so I hope our listeners will also take something away from this conversation. And big thank you to our guests for sharing their expertise with us.
Follow us on social media and subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring stories from ESCAP.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and be a part of a solution for our region. Goodbye.